Hey guys, welcome to AMA 11. This is virtually a part 2 to AMA 10. These are some more detailed answers or extra bits of information based on questions I received on the back of AMA 10. Now, I received a bunch of excellent questions and a fair few of them too, which is good because it's helped me to make this other video. I struggle to come up with topics to talk about. I obviously have information that my customers want, but I have no idea what to actually talk about, and I tend to just rant because I have no idea. I really need to have someone down here with me so I can someone can bounce questions off me. But anyway, I've got the questions down, and the first one, just a really good one. Someone said, so after all that talk about air compressors, what did you finally land on to use for yourself in the new place? Unfortunately, I hadn't decided on anything yet at the time of filming that last filming AMA 10. But since then, I've bought another AEG. I haven't had a lot of experience with the AEG brand. But I hear they make reliable, good products. And the last one we purchased, which is a belt drive air compressor, was decent, was good. Went for the silent model. I've got to let you know that I don't like the use of the term silent to describe quiet air compressors. This AEG that we tested, is roughly 70 to 75 decibels. A device that makes noise that reaches 70 to 75 decibels shouldn't be described as silent. It's something that just gets to me. I don't know why. Silence and 75 decibels, huge, significant difference between those two things. Anyway, it's not silent. Don't expect them to be silent. Don't even expect them to be quiet. I haven't heard a silent air compressor with my own ears that was less than, say, 60 decibels. And 60 decibels is loud. The room noise here, before I started talking, the room noise here was 20 decibels. And this isn't a library. This is in a really ultra quiet office. It's just a little pet peeve. I'll stop talking about it. I just don't like the term silent. I think it's a bit of a stretch. But in this day and age where everything is complete lies, I suppose it's fitting. So this new AEG is the silent version, operates around the 70, closer to 70 than 75 most of the time. I tested it a few times, 1 meter away, same device I was using for the other air compressors, and it's 10 to 15 decibels lower, which is significant. That makes a huge difference. So while I don't like the term silent, it is much quite significantly quieter than the others. And that means that I can have it just a couple of meters away from me, have noise cancelling headphones on, or at least headphones with significant isolation, and not hear it at all. Really, really nice. The other thing I like is knowing that my neighbours won't hear it. I leave the compressor on 24/7 and it may charge during the night. Very rare because all my lines are really well sealed. However, I sometimes may stop using the compressor just as the tank pressure is low enough where a small amount of leak over a few hours will cause it to drop below the threshold where the unit will tell itself to recharge. So it may kick on in the middle of the night and run it would probably do that for about a minute. And when that thing kicks on, it's 70 decibels 1 meter away from the unit, and where that unit is stored inside a sealed garage within a few meters of my property, I think it's unlikely that you'll hear it at all. The noise level will probably dip below ambient noise level. So very, very happy with the amount of noise it makes, happy with the amount of airflow. So CFM is quite high, I can't remember, but I'll put all the specs down below and I'll link to the actual unit that I purchased. The unit came in at under $1,000. That came into usually something like this, a tool like this that I will buy and have for 10 to 15, maybe possibly even 20 years. If it's $1,000 or $1,500, really, it doesn't make a huge difference to me, but money's money, right? And $600-700 extra, which I think was the next one that I was looking at, was about the $1,500 mark, and this one was $800, if I remember correctly. $800 to $1,500 extra, and I did use both of them, and I couldn't see enough of a difference to justify that cost. So I went with the $800 unit. I can't talk about reliability. Only time will tell. So maybe we revisit this this unit in terms of reliability, and even performance. See how it performs over the long term. If I see degradation in any way, but it does keep up with everything that I've asked it to do. It's more than enough pressure. I've actually dialed down the pressure a little bit, which helps your charge last a little bit longer. If you can get your tank pressure up to whatever it is above what you're asking it, the regulator is regulating that pressure down, you're going to take less of that charge from the tank, and that tank is going to last longer. So the unit won't have to switch on to fill the receiver as often. This is capable of putting out, I think, 145, creating 145 psi of tank pressure, which is too much. It's more than I need. It's more than I want. I feel that around 100 psi is the limit for detailing, because you can lift the edge of stickers, and you can, if there's a stone chip, you can start to lift paint off and things with very, very high pressures. So I like to dial it down to around 100 or just under 100. That's more than enough for doing my job. Any pressure, any amount of pressure over that doesn't necessarily get the job done faster and introduces more risk. So that's how I arrive at that recommendation of 100 psi. I didn't talk about hose organization. A lot of people were asking me how they organize their hoses and how they keep them from just becoming an awful mess. When I don't have proper organization, I wrap the hose around the compressor itself, around the handle or something like that, just making sure that the hose doesn't come into contact with anything that's hot. But what I like the most is a reel. And at the last place, we used to use the McNaught retractor reel products, which I think are the best and not the cheapest. But if you've got the money, buy those. Unfortunately, I wanted one. They didn't make them in black. At least I couldn't find them in black at a couple of stores that I went to. So I went and bought another brand, and where it was in black. And the store clerk told me that it was just as good as the McNaught. The McNaught retractor reel just works so much more smoothly and is more. I'm more confident when it's retracting or it's going to lock. The one that I bought, the Daytona brand, significantly cheaper, so that's a big plus. Came in black, which I like.
Giggity.
No reflections on the cars, and it's smoother and quieter. It actually is smoother and quieter than the McNaught, but it's I haven't got a good feel for it. I've been using it for a while now, and I don't know when it's going to retract or what it's going to do, and that just upsets me. It gives me some frustration from time to time, and I don't think any more experience with it is going to help that. I'm not understanding you anymore. I think it's just that the mechanism is just not as confident as the McNaught stuff. So for organization, a retractor reel is my number one recommendation. Otherwise, a couple of hooks on the wall, and you can wrap the hose around those hooks to keep them nice and neat, or wrap it around the handle of the machine itself. Just make sure that the hose isn't coming into contact with the motor, which when we're using the machines the way we do for detailing, and they run consistently for hours, parts of that air compressor will get very, very hot and melt the line. Also got some questions about the air tools that I use, and I've got a bunch of them. I didn't want to go over too many, but basically just a few different blowers, shorties, and then some long ones. I use the long, I think it's about 30 centimeters long, with a slightly bent, the end of the wand is slightly bent, and that's the one I use the most. I find that fantastic. Possibly because I'm 3'8", so removing water around sunroof seals, things like that, where a windscreen meets a roof, and you have to reach a long way. Having the wand a little longer and having it bent in that shape has been amazing. I did make a video on this specific tool. If you go back, I think it's called Long Bent Wand or something like that. It's a vlog. Another air tool I use, which I think is a must-have just around the house, is a Tyre inflator. And you can buy cheap ones and you can buy good ones. And I don't know if this is the best one, but I just really like it. Over the years, I've used all these different ones that either I've been working with mechanics, or I have a friend that's a mechanic, or at the workshops that I worked in, like BMW Australia or Mercedes-Benz Australia. They have good quality air tools everywhere. And I just like this one. I'll leave a link to the brand and the model in the video description. I think that it's very, very accurate. I had a friend once who could test it for accuracy, and he said it was within it's less than 1 psi of accuracy, which I think is amazing. I'm not sure if I got a good copy or not, or these are just consistent quality, consistently accurate, this particular product. But I like the way it works. I like that the feedback on the unit. They seem well built enough. These used to be around at every service station, and they seem to be able to cop a beating. They're built really well. So this is my recommendation for a Tyre inflator. Of course, you can use a whole heap of air tools with your air compressor. I should mention that we were building, I'm putting together another garage on the property, and we're doing some framing. I was using a framing gun with the little Ryobi that I mentioned in the last episode, the 2 horsepower, 50 litre Ryobi Airwave, the $250 unit, and quite a big framing gun, an old one too, very, very old, about 20 years old, and needs a fair bit of oomph to get it to work. No issues making it work off any of the. I've tried it with all of the air compressors that I demonstrated in AMA 10, and the one that I finally landed on and showed you just before in this episode. I thought that might be of interest to you if you do use a framing gun and other things. The only thing I may not recommend any of these compressors for is spray painting. I did a bit of spray painting back in the day before I was a detailer. I thought my career was going to be painting cars. For painting cars, I'll leave this up to someone who knows a lot more about automotive painting than I do, but I liked a much bigger compressor, which was delivered much more consistent pressure, and you would need more quality control along the way. What I mean by that is, so the compressors I use in between the compressor and the end of the line, whatever air tool I'm using, I have one small water air separator, and that removes water from the air and gives you drier air, and that's more than good enough for doing interiors and especially exterior work. But for spray painting, you'd need to make sure that air is very, very, very dry. It's not wet at all. There's no water, no oil, nothing contaminating the paint, because it ends up coming through to the surface. So I don't want to comment too much on a compressor for spray painting. You're best off asking someone that's much, much more experienced than me in that field. But I did get the question, and I wouldn't recommend any of the units that I've recommended for detailing here. I would get a much bigger unit with a much bigger tank and a much more powerful motor, so that you didn't have the fluctuations in pressure. The fluctuations in pressure for drying a car, working on interiors, and things that detailers do don't matter. As long as at the very, very minimum you have 90 psi, and at the top end you have, say, 110 psi, and it varies 20 psi, it's no problem. But for a painter, at least for me anyway, I was only a second year apprentice. So I wasn't a third year apprentice painter. I wasn't very good. I found my paint okay. I still got a motorbike that I painted in the 90s, and the paint's still on it and it looks good, so I did a good enough job. I just found that I was getting lots of orange peel and the textural issues when the compressor that I was using, because I did some jobs, backyard jobs, I found that the texture of the paint was inconsistent, was not what I wanted when I was using a compressor that wasn't very big and very capable of maintaining a consistent pressure, and when the line wasn't treated to have dry air. This requires, and maybe I should talk to someone, make a video where I'm talking to someone who either manufactures air compressors for painters or is a spray painter and knows a lot about the air compressors and can make a better recommendation than I can for one of those units. But really good question. Now, for pressure washer, I had a few questions about not so much the washer. I had a lot of people say that they already had a look, and 2 people have already bought the Comet based on my recommendation, which is, I hope you like it. I'm sure you will. But things like, I think it was Alex. Yeah, it was Alex that asked what Shortie trigger I was using, because he's obviously seen me use a Shortie and not the long wand that I had in a lot of my recent videos. Giggity. I've been a little bit lazy to remove the long wand from the Comet. The long, I think it's about 1 meter long wand that comes with the Comet pressure washer. I kept that on because I was using that for things around the house as well as detailing cars. I'm now kind of finished using it for those applications, and I've got another unit for that. I certainly don't need that long one, and it gets in the way. So it's always been my recommendation, and if you've been watching my videos for some time, you would have seen my recommendation a few times to use a Shortie trigger for detailing. A Shortie is a lot less cumbersome, and it basically gives you the ability to get right up underneath wheel arches, and in detailed areas you can get down into engine bays. You can put your whole arm down into an engine bay and wash something that you can't get to with a long wand that's going to bump around and get in the way. And with something like the Comet, not just the Comet, but the old Spitwater we had, or a commercial pressure washer, it's easy to modify the trigger on these units. It's much, much more difficult to do as you get closer and closer to a consumer device. They usually come in with molded or built-in or proprietary fittings, and you can't put something like a Shortie on it. The particular trigger I purchased, I don't think is as important. There are a bunch of very, very high quality ones, but I really like this one. I've used a few others. I've been recommended a few others. There were some knockoffs of the one that I was using, and they were just junk. The main difference was the plastic that was used. I didn't take it apart and have a look at what type of plastic was used, but I think they were using probably ABS plastic, maybe polypropylene, but it wasn't reinforced in any way. I'm not sure what the bar Vega that I prefer to use. This is the one that you can see here. I'm not sure what plastic they're using, but it's probably something like polypropylene, and it's most likely reinforced with glass fiber. It doesn't matter. I can tell you from tons of experience that these can be dropped and dragged around and will never, ever give up unless you're doing something completely silly with them. You'd have to drive over this with a heavy vehicle multiple times to get it to break. I've seen these in so many commercial applications being absolutely abused and last. This trigger was $100. I'm not sure if I got a deal or not, but when I bought the Comet from Vic Pumps, I said, give me a Shortie trigger. I want a bar Vega. And they gave me one of those, and I just checked the invoice, it was $100. I think if you're going to save $20 or $30 or $40 or $50, you're crazy. Unless perhaps you're buying the trigger for yourself. $50 is a lot of money, and you're going to be very, very, very careful with that trigger. Otherwise, I would just recommend to spend the extra and get yourself this trigger, which, if you're using it at home, will last you forever, especially if you're looking after it. You're not hurling it across the room. They're almost impossible to break. They fit every commercial line that I can find. I think it's a 3/8 inch line, which most commercial triggers, like the Spitwater that we talked about in the last episode, the Comet that I'm currently using now, they just screw straight on. A little bit of Teflon tape sometimes, and screw them on nice and tight. This one swivels, so it's very easy to use. It swivels independently of the line. You don't want one that's fixed, because the line will tend to flip around. It'll make the job more cumbersome. And at worst, you might have the line flip around and hit a vehicle. And yes, you can usually buff out those little marks, but why would you want to damage a customer's car? I won't go on anymore. That's my recommendation for a Shortie trigger, is the bar, and I'm pretty sure it's called a Vega. It's this one that you can see here. Worth every penny, in my opinion. Next thing was I had a customer say, "Oh, you should use a turbo nozzle because it delivers so much more power than I think he said pressure. It delivers so much more pressure. A turbo nozzle doesn't deliver more pressure. A turbo nozzle just spins around and is a lot more aggressive. And my recommendation is to absolutely stay away from a turbo nozzle for automotive use. You're going to do some damage. I've got one. I use it to clean concrete. I use it to prepare the concrete before we painted the concrete in the room. I used to clean my driveway and things like that. Fantastic, really very, very useful. But a turbo nozzle for automotive use, I mean, I think it's bonkers. You're just waiting for something to go wrong. I like just a simple fan, and usually I think 20 degrees, but I might just double check that and put that in the comments. Make sure that you've got a nozzle, the right nozzle, and something that's not too aggressive, something you're not going to lift paint off with. That's the nozzle there, and that fits into the end of your trigger, and Just make sure when you fit it in that it's either vertical or horizontal, whatever you prefer. I always prefer it to be horizontal, so if I'm holding the trigger this way, the fan is horizontal. You can muck around with these and get different fan patterns, but I would definitely not recommend anything as aggressive as a turbo nozzle for washing cars. If you like snow foam, because I constantly get asked this question, and the popular consensus is we don't like snow foam and never have, but that's not true. We actually liked and practiced snow foam and probably pioneered this method, pre-rinsing and using snow foam a long time ago, before we realized that that pre-rinsing and snow foam was either useless or bad for the vehicle. And the way that I found, so you can go ahead and do it if you like. I'm recommending you don't waste your time with snow foam or pre-rinsing. But if you'd like to do it, my recommended method to have that done is by using one of these. This is obviously a double-ended. It's got two nozzles. One's a low pressure and one's normal pressure or high pressure. This will mate to almost every trigger. You may need a step-down adapter in here. You will need this if you're mating it to the trigger that I recommended earlier. And then this allows you to have two nozzles, not simultaneously, but simultaneously on the gun. You can't use them simultaneously. In this area here, you have a ball bearing. You might be able to hear that. As it's either in this position and it's blocking this nozzle and forcing the water to come through the high pressure nozzle, or you flick it the other way, the ball bearing falls down, blocks this orifice, and then forces the water to come through the low pressure nozzle. Usually, when you have the pressure going through the low pressure nozzle, you drop your pressure right down, and the machine senses this. It uses a Venturi device to suck chemical up. And in what we used to do when we were using this, was it would be sucking up our shampoo, and that would create a foam. We'd snow foam the whole car and get ready for pre-rinsing. Then we'd flick it over, and you'd have your ball bearing block the low pressure nozzle. You'd get high pressure. Your pump just was always putting out the same amount of pressure, but because you've got a much smaller orifice, the same amount of water, liters per minute, but you'd now get high pressure because you're forcing the same amount of water through a much smaller orifice, and it doesn't suck chemical up anymore and through this anymore. This is just water only, and then you could rinse the car down. Very handy to have if you need low pressure and high pressure and don't want to switch between two guns or two separate systems. You can just buy one of these adapters. I don't know who makes this. I can't see any markings on it. There's no branding or anything on it, but I'm sure that if you go to a commercial pressure washer supplier and ask them for something like that, they would be able to recommend something to you. This one was used in our commercial car wash at Brunswick. We did up to 100 cars a day. It was because these are employees who don't pay for the equipment themselves. They treat it poorly. So this is obviously banged around a lot. It's seems to be made of solid brass. I don't think there's anything on it. Perhaps maybe this nozzle doesn't look brass, but everything else is brass. And it's had no maintenance at all. Looks like it's in a really bad way, but I tested it and everything works on it. So whatever this costs, you just pay for it because this lasts forever. Is it necessary though? No, this hasn't been fit to a unit for at least 10 years, probably 15 years. We haven't used this device. We don't use it because we don't use low pressure. We don't snow foam. We don't pre-rinse. We don't do any of that waste of time nonsense anymore. Now, organisation for your triggers and for your hoses, really important. You can get retractor reel type devices for high pressure. I haven't seen any of them that I like. You can get overhead booms that swing around the cars. You might see this at your coin-operated car wash, where your line and your trigger comes down from above, and it's on basically a clothesline. I like those a lot. There's a couple of downsides to those. There's pros and cons to those. And at home and in the setup that that I have where it's very low volume, there's no one but me using the unit, I prefer not to use that. So I'm happy to just have the hose drag around the car. That's because the hose I use doesn't curl up or flip around, and it's very easy to move around. And it's very high quality, so it won't abrade on the concrete, not quickly anyway. So there's no need for that setup. That setup is expensive, and if you don't have a very high roof, it will reduce the height of your roof. So if you've got a hoist underneath, or if you've got a high vehicle that comes in, you're actually taking the clearance away from the roof using that. So it's not better or worse. There's pros and cons. You should be aware of the pros and cons of having a clothesline system, and just choose the one that's right for you. In a commercial setup, especially if you have other people using it, this is why at a coin-operated car wash you'd see that system in place. I think that works there. But for home, I would just use the standard hose that came with the unit, or upgrade to something that doesn't flip around if that's not what you had. And then what I do is to put 1 or 2 hooks, and you might have seen this at the last workshop, where the hose is just simply wrapped around a hook, and that it keeps it neat. So when you have to put the hose away, you wrap it around a hook. When you have to take it off, you just simply lift the bunch of hose off and put it on the ground if you want all the hose. Otherwise, you take a couple of coils off. It's simple. You can do it yourself. You can install those 2 hooks yourself. It works. There's a place to store the trigger there. It's very neat. It's out of the way. For me, that's simple. Sometimes is the best way to go. Usually is the best way to go. That's simple, and it works. I Dynabolt those hooks to. I've got them Dynabolted to bluestone now. They're there forever. They're not going to fall off. They don't get in the way. They don't stick out of the wall much. It just works, and I'm not going to put something in place that's more sophisticated for. Actually, if I put an overhead line, it would actually take some clearance away, which is useful for me. I do get big trucks in. We had a Ram 1500 in the other day, and I need a little bit of room between the roof of the car and the roof of my workshop, to get to, a little bit of space to get to. They also block light. So if your light's coming from above, those systems do block a little bit of light. You need a ton of reinforcement. It's not cheap to install one, not cheap to buy the equipment, and not cheap to install. You need to make sure that system is bolted to something that's reinforced, just in case something, and this has happened often, something like you keep a trigger on the floor, you drive over the trigger, it wraps the line around the wheel, and it starts to pull the clothesline down from the roof. You have to make sure that it's so strong that's not going to happen. You're not going to drop that down on the car or on a person. I don't think that you should underestimate how much work should go into installing that system, and the cost that's associated with that. All right, I'm not going to go on too long about the details of all the little accessories and things. I'm going to wrap up this now. But if you do have more questions, let me know, and I'll either answer them in the comments, or if there are enough of them, make another video about it. Hope this is really useful. I hope you liked the last one, and I hope this is a good addition. Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas.